Most of us know, because many of us were there last night, we got to see it firsthand. At least for some of us, it was my first time seeing it firsthand, how the commercial fishermen are tackling the problem. And how many pounds y'all get in? How many pounds we get?
34 silver and like 300
3,400 silver, 300 mixed carp, and a couple catfish. Like I said, it was interesting to watch. So appreciate the invitation. Let's go ahead and get started. The commissioner will be here any minute. We'll call roll. First is Sammy Arnold. He told me he could not be here today. Monty Blue may be trying to call in a little bit. He had something to take care of it at his real job this morning, and he said he would try to call in if he could. Mike Butler with the Tennessee Wildlife Federation. We have Dennis Baxter here for Bob Deasy with TVA, and Frank Fiss is here, TWRA. Kurt Holbert couldn't be here today. Commissioner Salyers is on his way. Dennis Tumlin, Commissioner of Tourism. Travis Wiley with Corps, and then myself. We appreciate everybody being here this morning. That does give us a quorum. We've got 6 present. When the commissioner gets here, that'll be 7. And we do have an agenda, and I know we have several members from the public who've shown up this morning, and we will, at the end of our agenda, if any of the members of the public would like to make a comment, we'll have a time for public comment as well. We do appreciate you being here. First on the agenda is the old business and the status of the economic study. Dennis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to, when we go through the strategic plan that Mike Butler goes through here shortly, there's a topic there about this economic report. There's no movement, but I think it's part of the long-term plan, and if this commission approves the plan, it'll move forward.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. Mike, you're now recognized on the market research.
One of the things that's happened since our last meeting is that a gentleman named John Odom from Nashville, who is in the seafood business, reached out to us, and we met with him. He has a real interest in trying to crack the code on how you would get Asian carp in as human food, and I've talked with Clay and Barron and several of the people, Rob Goad here in Paris, Henry County Industrial Committee. We've talked about that, and this gentleman is building a business plan to pursue that. Just to give everybody here a little feel for it, my understanding in talking with you guys is that you get about 8 cents a pound for meal, you get about 12 cents a pound for bait, you can get as high as 18 cents a pound for big head for food, but this is the market doesn't exist, and so it's high risk, high reward type of thing, but this gentleman seems to be prepared to try to make a run at it. And if he did, then I would think that he would probably, the people he would be buying from are right here. So if he can develop that market and buy fish from this area, that we think that would be a good thing. We're hopeful that that could get to be a sustainable market, given the price points that it's at. But I think he's going to be looking towards institutional food, how you could make it into something that could be easily transported, easily cooked, and served in large quantities. That's the essence of it, but I thought it was worth mentioning that if anybody has any ideas that hears about this in the public, please contact me, Mike Butler with the Wildlife Federation in Nashville. We have offices here in West Tennessee, and we're looking for kind of all and any information we can get our hands on right now to try to help him.
Thank you, Mike. Next will be an update from Dennis Baxter on the programmatic environmental assessment process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a presentation we're going to present, and first and foremost, I want to talk about TVA's mission. TVA is committed to the balance and management of energy, environment, and economic development in the valley. And of course, this Asian carp problem is a major threat to all of that. So what does TVA plan to do? We have initiated the programmatic environmental assessment, which in the federal agencies have to actually write an environmental assessment or an impact statement by law, and it's called well, this one is a programmatic environmental assessment, which programmatic means we're not only gonna look at 2 or 3 dams, we're gonna look at all of 10 lock and dams in TVA system. So our purpose is to control the abundance and range expansion of the Asian carp within the Tennessee River system and its tributaries. And we're looking at potential fish barriers and the best places to put them and what types we're going to put. And so the environmental assessment, the purpose of that mitigation programmatic EA is to evaluate fish barriers at 10 lock and dams, and those lock and dams are Kentucky, Pickwick, Wilson, Wheeler, Guntersville, Nickajack, Chickamauga, Watts Bar, Fort Loudon, and Melton Hill. So all 10 lock and dams on TVA system. These documents that we write have to include more than just environmental issues. So a lot of the potential environmental impacts that are included in this document, and it's all encompassing, is water quality, soil erosion and land use, floodplains, aquatic and terrestrial ecology, threatened and endangered species, botany, wetlands, historic and archaeological resources, that's very important, solid and hazardous waste, safety, socioeconomic and environmental justice issues. So these documents contain a lot of information. And so in this programmatic EA, next slide,
Well,
please.
let's welcome Commissioner Salyers for being here. Commissioner, my phone took me to the other place as well.
I drove past here 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's right. Well, welcome this morning. We are on agenda item under old business number 3 right now. All right, welcome. What was your name again, sir? All right, all right. Welcome this morning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. So in this programmatic environmental assessment, we're looking at 6 alternatives. Basically, first alternative, no action. We don't do anything at all. Well, we all know that that's not a good idea. And then we're going to look at all the different deterrent options, from the bioacoustic fish fence, the acoustic deterrent system, the carbon dioxide, and the electric barriers. And alternative G is a combination of them. And so we'll either, anyway, the decision was made that we're probably going to look at 2 alternatives and explain them in depth, but all of them were investigated. So next slide. So the barrier technologies considered, click it one more time. There you go. The bioacoustic fish fence, like I said before, the CO2, the acoustic system, and electric current. And you can see in this depiction here, the top right is the BAF system, where it's a cross-section of the downstream entrance to the lock, and you can see all of the speakers, strobe lights, and diffusers pipes with compressed air are actually embedded in the bottom in the channel. It cannot stick up because barges will take that equipment out. So we have to have it dredged out and actually put in on the bottom, so when barges go through there, we don't lose that equipment. Well, go ahead.
If you don't mind me asking a question, are there any place in the world where this type of barrier is effective and working to keep whether Asian carp or another type of species out of a river system?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Barkley Dam, it has an experimental BAF system installed. The experiment's still going on. We just received some preliminary information that it's actually more effective than we thought.
Okay, good.
So that's good news. I'd like to share good news, but it's still an experiment, and we're learning as we go. And it has worked in the laboratory settings too, where they test it on fish. So, but real time, right in the river test is the best test you can have. Now, having said that, what occurs at Barkley and the Cumberland system may be a little bit different somewhere else. So we're gonna have to, if we do install these type of barriers, we're gonna have to probably tweak them as we go to make them more efficient. And it takes a lot of, let's just say it's an ongoing experiment. So in that picture, the top picture was the BAF system, and it shows all the equipment. And the lower part is actually the locked chamber. So if we use carbon dioxide, it will be inside the locked chambers. That way, the locked chambers can be flooded with the CO2, the fish will be forced out, or because of lack of oxygen. And that's a good way of purging locked chambers. It was tested in the locked chambers with a research project, and it was very effective. So I just wanted to share that.
And
Go ahead.
And how expensive is that type of a barrier system?
Oh, I don't have
You have
that
a price on that?
information.
Okay.
Frank, do you have any idea?
I remember doing some calculations. It was at least $500 per cycle to, just in CO2. Now, to install all the piping and all that, we're talking at least $3 million to set all that up. And then there's, operation and maintenance of keeping the CO2 on site.
And when you say 500 per cycle each time the lock opens and closes?
Yeah, on a.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, CO2 is expensive, and you have to haul CO2 to the site. So you're gonna increase traffic going to and from the site. So it's one of those things that, we'll use it if it's needed, but if it's not needed, we'll tend to use another type of structure. So all this information that we've gathered was used in an interagency team, and it's a sub-team of Micro, which is the Tennessee Cumberland Basin, which Frank Fitz leads. Thank you, Frank. And we've been talking about barriers for a long time, 2 or 3 years now. And, where are the pinch points and that kind of stuff. So, next slide. So the Mississippi Interstate Cooperative Resource Association, the Tennessee Cumberland Working Group that we belong to, we asked the USGS to hold a workshop for us. And it's like a decision tree workshop where they use modeling, and they'll use all the input from all the subject matter experts to help make a decision, and that can be defendable, which is very important. The decision analysis of barrier placement and targeted removal to control Asian carp in the Tennessee River is the final product of that working group. And the working group had webinars, which was very, very informative to a lot of, not only the NEPA writers, but for everyone on this subgroup, where we went over the NEPA process, the flu-egg modeling, which I'll describe in a little bit, and the latest deterrent technologies, and collection and removal techniques from electrofishing, netting, and the modified unified method. So the flu-egg model, next slide. The flu-egg model predicts flow regimes in Tennessee reservoirs where eggs can stay suspended to hatch. So the unique thing of these Asian carp is when you have low flow velocities in our reservoirs, the eggs have to stay suspended to mature before they hatch. If the water slows down real slow, like it does in most of our reservoirs, those eggs will filter down into the sediment and die. So far, that's what we theorize we've been seeing. That's why we haven't had giant explosions of juvenile and larval Asian carp. So this model will predict, okay, what flow regimes and what reservoirs will be likely to see this. And a lot of times when you have over 600 miles of river system, you really need to narrow down where you need to look. It's like a needle in a haystack if you're looking for larvae and looking for reproduction. So the reservoirs likely to possess these flow regimes are Kentucky, Wheeler, Guntersville, Chickamauga, and Watts Bar. Now, having said all that, you have to have certain flow regimes. So we looked at all different flows, high flow, medium flow, low flow, all different conditions. And most of the time, it's a very narrow window where these things can hatch, but it is possible. And that's what I'm trying to stress here. So you have to basically have some high flows to keep the water moving, to keep these eggs suspended. And typically, they could survive going through turbines, but more than likely, they're gonna be, the egg membranes will be ruptured and they'll die going through reservoirs. So that's a good thing. So keep in mind, this is just a model telling us these are the areas that we need to look for if and when Asian carp get in these areas to see if they're reproducing. So we use this model in this programmatic EA to help us decide, okay, let's prioritize where we need to put these type of systems. So next slide. So
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? When do the Asian carp, I know there's like 4 species we're interested, when do they spawn?
okay, they can start as early as, depends on water temperature. Sorry. They can start, it depends on water temperature, of course. It can start as early March, correct me Frank if I'm wrong, it can go through, all the way through October.
Yeah, the silver and big heads, it's 65 degrees that they're looking for. So a lot of those early spring high flow events are not as threatening as it would be for another species that would spawn in colder water.
But for the most part, the discharge through the dams is slower. Summer months, October.
Generally speaking, yeah, unless we have a hurricane or something.
Okay, thanks.
Right, and that's a very good question because, yeah, the spring events, you're saying, oh my gosh, the flow is high, these eggs, but they're not hatching at the time. So that's a good thing. So anyway, the flu egg modeling was good to see because yes, there's a potential, but you have to have certain conditions. Not saying it won't happen, but it's unlikely it'll happen often. So first and foremost, we'd like to keep all the Asian carp in the Ohio River. That's what I'd like to do. But, so the public environmental assessment in the public review, we are finishing the document. We actually sent the document out to certain stakeholders for review. We had internal review and we had executive review. So we had a lot of edits. We've edited the document. The document's going to come out July 7th, okay, for public review. And it's going to be available for 30 days for comment. So August 5th, 2021 is the last day of comment. And if you do send comments, they need to be postmarked by August 5th. Go ahead.
Do the comments have to be sent in a hard copy, or can they be filed electronically? Because that's something I'm sure that I know I've got a couple groups in East Tennessee that don't want to make comments. We're going to need to get this link out so they know where to go to make the comments, either online, submit them electronically, or do a hard copy. If you could cover that, and maybe that's something that I will. I'm going to point to Chris. Chris, you help me remember. We'll get this out. We'll get this information out officially from the commission to the public, either through a press release that we can do with TWRA helping us do that press release, so we can get it out to the public about when this public comment will be open, and that they need to submit them during that time period.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We do have a press release that we're developing right now. It's getting ready to be sent out. I'll make sure your office gets a copy for sure. The document will be available online at the tva.com/NEPA website. And that information will be there. You can actually use that same website to provide comments. Okay. Or you can, and we're also going to have a virtual public meeting July 15th this year, and that way people can tune in, they can hear about the different things I just discussed in more detail. And,
And all that information will be on the press release that y'all are
Yes.
working on that we then can forward out as well. All right, thank you.
yes, and so the website will have all that information. So any comment can be submitted through the website, like I said, and, or you can email your comments to Elizabeth Smith, and the address will be in the press release. Of course, I said by August 5th, you have to have your comments postmarked if you send them. And please note, any comment that's received, including names and addresses, will be part of the project administrative record by law and will be available for public inspection. So if you make a comment, we want you to make comments, but be aware your name and address will be out there too. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And for more information on the NEPA process, Elizabeth Smith is the project manager of that. And it will be in the press release, and up here on the screen, you know, that's her email address. It's esmith14@tva.gov. And she'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions and/or get you hard copies or anything that you need to help review this document. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Dennis, appreciate that. I've got another question, then I'll open it up to the other committee members, see if they have a question as well. You know, the $64,000 question is, after the public comments have been submitted, how long is it going to take TVA to develop, I guess, the plan or meet all the requirements to do this? Because the question that I'm hearing from my constituents, I'm sure even more so Bruce is hearing from his constituents here in West Tennessee, when can we start putting barriers up? So how long would it be, if we can fund them, how long would it be before we could start putting barriers up?
That's a very good question, Mr. Chairman. Funding is the key.
Right.
You know, and I can have Travis chime in here, but typically, the WARDA of 2020 bill that provided $25 million for barriers and projects in the Cumberland and Tennessee River systems has been, you know, appropriated, but it's not available yet for the Corps to use. So we're waiting for that process to go through. But having said that, once we do get funding, we should be able to, and once the programmatic EA is finalized, which will be probably November.
Okay, be November.
It's going to take a while to get all the incorporations, or incorporate all the edits and whatnot in there and get it published in the Federal Register.
Okay.
Typically, we should be able to get a memorandum of agreement with the Corps of Engineers where TVA and the Corps agree on, you know, issues. We'll use the programmatic EA plus the EA that the Corps is going to write about the Cumberland system, because this programmatic EA is just for the Tennessee system. So the Cumberland system has to, and we'll look at it as a whole package. Okay, where do we need to put barriers? What is recommended, et cetera, and more than likely, what type of barriers installed. And so the USGS-led matrix team had provided a list of recommended locations and what type of barriers put in. So that's a good, so we have a prioritized list that's going to be in this PEA.
Okay.
And of course, we're waiting on edits right now, so I don't want to release too much information because it can change. But so when can we put the first barrier in? More than likely, it'll be probably late of 2022.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Best case scenario, we've got the money.
Right.
It'd be late 2022 before we could put a barrier in, probably on Barkley.
Well, Barclay's already there, it's experimental. The Corps can decide to make that permanent, which
Okay.
is a good idea. And then Kentucky would be a very good logical choice, Wilson and going
Okay.
upstream.
All right.
And keep in mind, the main goal is, number one, keep the juvenile fish from coming up from the Ohio River, because they're spawning in the Ohio River. And there's a lot of juvenile fish there. So, you know, the theory now is to try to keep them from coming in the system and then cut off the leading edge in the Tennessee River and the Cumberland Rivers with barriers to contain them. And then we could work on other barriers if needed. So that's the plan.
Okay. Mike, I think you wanted to speak to the funding.
Just a quick update on funding. We worked with several staffs on the House and Senate side to write the appropriations and or the two appropriation requests. One to retain the $25 million that's come to the Mississippi River Basin that's come the last 2 years. That was a renewal. Senator Haggerty agreed to carry that forward into Senate Appropriations because he's on that committee. Congressman Fleischman is the sole Tennessee appropriator on the House Appropriations Committee. He agreed to do the same. And then there's a separate request to what Dennis is talking about through the Water Resources Development Act, or WRDA, that is $25 million for up to 10 projects on the Tennessee and Cumberland River system. That request is in the hands of Senator Haggerty, and he's carrying that forward as well. If anybody probably didn't get to see this, but he was had a session with the Secretary of the Interior last week where Carp was the one of two issues that he raised to her attention to say that it was important to him. So as a top two priorities with the Secretary of the Interior, Carp is one of them for him, which is a really good sign. He's picking up where Senator Alexander left off. The timing on this, next week early is when the House Interior Appropriations Committee and the House Water and Energy Committees will mark up those bills. So we're hoping, as Dennis mentioned, all of the funding for barriers was authorized in the omnibus spending bill this past December that came out of the Trump administration, and we've got it's a two-step process. You have to get it appropriated, so that's what we're working on now. So if we get it this year, that money would come available October 1 of this year in the next fiscal budget for the federal government, and then it's going to take probably, there's no telling how long it would take. I mean, it's going to take a year to probably get that money actually to the agencies that would need to work with it, and then there's planning and building and all that stuff, prioritization. It'll take some time. That's why we've got to keep our foot on the commercial fishing piece of this to buy ourselves the time to be able to do it.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Travis, did you want to, I know your name was called, did you want to add something?
No, I was just gonna, back up what they said. The money's been authorized up to $25 million. It hasn't been appropriated yet, and so, there are things we can't do until we have the money. Dennis and I, and as well as other representatives of TVA and the Corps, have had initial discussions on the MOA for the Tennessee River projects post-NEPA, and so we would come together on an MOA that would sort of outline agency responsibilities, who does what on those barriers, and sort of formalize it in writing.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Seeing none, I want to go ahead and bring up another possible source of funding that Mike and I were talking about yesterday. And Mike, I'm having a brain freeze right here. What's the it was the CARES Act under Trump. What's it called under?
The American Rescue Plan.
American Rescue Plan. Yeah. The state's going to get, well, the state's already gotten a lot of money, just like your local, your counties and cities have gotten money under the CARES Act and the the American Rescue Plan. And Mike and I were talking yesterday, part of the money, I believe, would fit the category of spending it on the mitigation program that we have already funded through TWRA, and TWRA is funding that, the HIP program, but possibly doing more with this money, and that's something this commission could do, is make a formal request to the administration, the Lee administration, to set aside some money that could be used to continue the mitigation, but also possibly do barriers. Mike, is that kind of what we were talking about yesterday? And
yes, sir. The thinking is that we need to get started desperately on at least one to get it in the ground. If we're starting to see the preliminary data and that holds, it would be great to have access to some of those funds coming through ARP that would be able to put a barrier down, given the complexity and the problem, how long it takes to get that stuff done. Every day Frank, we started talking about stuff like this 5-6 years ago, and we're still talking about it, and we've made great strides. We're making big steps, but we have to have barriers. We have to have barriers or we're just wasting time. I
Right.
mean, we've got to catch a lot of fish and we got to have barriers. So if there's a way, I would support if we could, as a commission, put forth a request to the administration to consider spending up to $10 million on barriers and/or other aspects to mitigate carp. That was just the ballpark, and I based that number based upon some of the information we know around what it's taken to do that at Barkley. But it would get us kick-started, it would get us ahead of the curve a little bit, because we're hearing about fish massing down at Pickwick every day is time gone by.
Okay. All right. And Mike, I will take the lead on that. I'll meet with the governor's office and see what's the best way we submit a proposal to do that. I'll ask them the best way to do that.
Mr. Chairman,
We'll get a proposal.
I am actually working with the policy office in the governor's, well, with the governor, and I'm pretty sure we already have that identified in there. We're trying to, it's back and forth with the federal government right now on what the funds can be used for.
Okay.
But I will definitely work with you to make that formal request.
Well, and I appreciate the commissioner, and I appreciate you already putting this on their plate, and they know this issue, and if, and I understand the federal government setting the criteria for how this money can be spent. And if it does fall within that criteria, I think this would be a great place for Governor Lee to put some money to show that we're finally going to put a barrier up, because that's what we're hearing from, Bruce, I think, had to leave, I don't see him now, but that's what I'm hearing from my constituents in East Tennessee. You know, we've talked about this a long time, and it's hard. Y'all know it's hard for the public to understand the length of the study that TVA is having to go through that's required by federal law. We can't skip it. And, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating to our citizens. It's frustrating to the people out there who don't know about this process. Why aren't you doing something? And if we could have that money ready to go, so when it is finally approved, when all the hoops have been jumped through that are there by law, I understand we can't avoid them, that we could put something, say on the ground, but we could put something in the water. So, Mike, yes.
I do want to say thank you to Dennis and TVA.
Absolutely.
For being proactive and spending the serious money that you spent on the EIS, because having the foresight a year ago or more to start that process, that would have just added another year to the process. So thank you so much for doing that. It's incredibly important.
All right, any other comments on this item number 3, on the environmental assessment, the update? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, new business, to establish committees to address marketing and business development. Now, I know we talked about this last time, and I think, Dennis, I'll recognize you. I think we were putting you in charge of this.
Yes, sir, I think that committee's, whether we made it formal or not, we've got myself and Sammy Arnold, and we drafted Chris Richardson in on the business development / marketing side, unless you see that as 2 different committees, but we're kind of running it synonymous and together on those. We're working on transportation costs with Barron on the bait market. We're trying to help solve, as diesel fuel is increasing and the cost to move this bait around is increasing. We're working on that issue. Been working with Mike Butler on the food sciences with the University of Tennessee, trying to get this thing developed for human consumption, better studies. So we're active almost daily on this topic.
Okay. Thank you. Any other new business anybody like to bring up? If not, I do want, Dennis? Yep.
Do we have a spot to talk about the strategic document that I think Mike passed out? Do we want to talk about that at all yet? Was it too early?
I would defer to Commissioner Sawyers, since he was the one who made the request at the last meeting, if that's all right.
Let me just say that Mike, and I'm going to guess it's probably Lindsey Gardner on your team, did a really nice job at pulling this document together that we've looked at, and we have a couple of our internal folks, Dr. Abkowitz and Dr. Tribble, working through this as well. So I think this is an excellent document, excellent start, and with a lot of what Dennis has shared today, and Mike and I have not got to talk about this, but I know we're on the same page. We want to continue to build this out. You know, what are the milestones? You know, WERDA 2020. You know, the money coming out. There'll be another WERDA somewhere down the road. Do we need to make an additional request? You know, what agency or agencies are responsible to drive each particular task? So So I think it's really good. I think Mike calls it, a lot of it blocking and tackling. So, you know, I don't know if this diagram was shared or not. Probably. Yeah, I'll get this out to the commission members, but it was a way of really talking about the plan sort of visually. But I can't imagine some, you know, schedules, milestones, actions, and ownership of certain items. So just thank you, Mike, for your great work on this.
Kendra was a big help. We met a couple times, and it really, and I want to also, the core of this came straight from TWRA's plan and Frank's work at the agency and his team. They, you know, we tried to keep it simple. I will touch on just real quick, there's 4 goals in it. One is to stop the spread of Asian carp and reduce their abundance in heavily infested waters. The second one is remove large numbers of Asian carp in Tennessee waters. 3 is monitor and assess efforts to remove and block Asian carp. That we need to do that one so we know what we're doing is working and we're not wasting money. And then the 4th one was mitigate economic losses associated with Asian carp. So it's fairly straightforward, but I'm happy to share it with anybody if you didn't see it already.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Commissioner. Any further new business? Seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment. If anybody's here from the public like to say anything, sir, we're going to need to get you on the record. If you could go over here to the microphone. Appreciate you being here this morning. Yeah, it would be easier right here. Yeah, that would work. Frank, that would work fine. And sir, if you would, please give us your name. And if you're with somebody, tell us, you know, if you're with the group. If not, if you're just here by yourself, just give us your name and your comments.
I actually am here with a group. I founded a company back in 2013 called, excuse me, I'm kind of a little hung up. I've had several traumas the last 5 or 6 years. That's why I'm in a wheelchair. When Bobby met me, we were fishing and working, talking about Asian carp at Carp Madness. Okay. However, I opened up a company called Carp Management Group in 2013, and Bobby actually knows the plans and the buildings, and we actually had a meeting at my place in Franklin with attorneys and the Ingram Group. And why I brought the Ingram Group in this was simply because they are in the barge traffic, and the Ingram family is one of the largest families and richest families there is in Tennessee, besides the owner of FedEx and Brad Kelly, which at that time he was the owner of the place that I used to lease. I owned Gulf Pride Seafood at the Metro Farmers Market in the factory in Franklin, sold over 300 restaurants. I actually had Clay Young contact me, his wife, when they first started processing the fish, and we couldn't get any restaurants interested in using it simply because of the carp name. The rebranding of this fish is supposed to be happening at the Boston Seafood Show, which I've been in the seafood industry and come recommended, and actually own a processing plant in Louisiana for over 25, 30 years. Used to move around $5 million a year just in Nashville to the upscale restaurants. This is going to be a hard fish, as American Caviar knows, to process and handle, especially by hand. And they have done the best job that there is across this nation supplying food-grade fish, because their fishermen have taken the time to take care of the fish and fish at night. These fish are coming out of 75, 80 degree water right now. Infrastructure is one of the people that I have talked to and I have had to recommend. Even when Bobby was sitting at that meeting when he was still the state biologist and fished in some of my boats, and we're on some of the TV shows. In this file right here, this folder goes back to 2013. Bassmasters and you name it, it's in here. Henry County, actually, the mayor back then gave me 5 acres over here. But you did not have the facility to put in a plant that would handle 200,000 pounds of fish a day to process them into a food-grade fish, because you have to have all the wheel turning. I have to be able to use this for silage. I have to use this for meal. I have to make it a food product. I have to make it a kosher label. I have to package it. I have to package it in a way that it's going to hold up. I had 22 million metric tons sold at one time in China. And the fish came out of Kentucky and went to Illinois and was put on a container back in 15, 14. This is why all these companies have gone out of business. It's because the infrastructure, and it's because the fish have not been taken care of from the time it's caught to the time it reaches the supplier. This falls under HACCP, FDA, and USDA inspections, including Falcon Protein, who is the mill plant and the developers of the mill plant. In this package, I have a no-compete from them from 2013. That plant was originally put in Grafton. The first plant was developed and put in out of Mississippi, developed by the University of Auburn down there. Gentlemen, I sat on the board years ago that wrote the HACCP procedures out of LSU. I've been in the industry that long. I'm not saying I know everything, but I'm telling you right now, unless you get the infrastructure to take care of these fish, for the fishermen to take care of these fish, none of your dog food plants, Royal Canine, bars, this equipment Falcon Protein built that is now the Grafton, the plant that was out of Grafton, out of Bairdstown right now, is aquatic protein at 8 cents a pound. It's been in and out of business 4 or 5 times. This guy now is making a business of it because the marijuana fields are able to use the growers, especially out of Canada. Yeah, I got pot stock, bought it 5 or 6 years ago. But however, they're able to use this as organic fertilizer. That's where it's going right now. Your biggest plant making hydrolysis has been in East Tennessee. It was on one time by Inland Seafood, which was Joel Knox. I know a lot of these players. I know who's pushing the lobster bait. I used to buy from William Atwood, lobster trap. I've been in this for a while. Bobby knows the plant I'm talking about. There's people right now looking at this out of New York. I can't mention any of it. Can't talk about it. But I can tell you this, there's a plant in Tennessee that could become the leader on this battle. Yes, I've had Bob Deasy on the phone too, back in February. He knows who I am and he knows what plant I'm talking about. And he knows where it is, and it sits on the river. And one of the biggest problems that any producer or any supplier is going to have, just like I did in Louisiana, TVA controls the water rights. Just like me right now, I've got my fish camp down in Danville. I didn't finish building it. I built it to process Asian carp. Yeah, I've got an 8 by 10 cooler down there. I've got a processing facility.
Sir, we need to limit your comments to 5 minutes, and
I tell
if
you what,
you could wrap up.
I understand, and I just want to emphasize, this can be done. It can be sold. Tennessee has a facility that it can be put in. And it will cost an enormous amount of money, and there are people looking at it right now.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And I apologize that we need to limit public comments to 5 minutes per person. Apologize for that. So anybody else from the public like to make a comment this morning before we close? If not, Clay, I'd like to ask you one question, if I could, and if you could come to the mic, that's just so we have everything on the record. I know that the fish experts up here, and it's not that I don't believe them. I just want to ask you your experience of being on the river. Juvenile fish, and it was very interesting last night seeing the fish that y'all were catching with the nets. They were almost all, I don't know, 5 to 15 pounds, maybe 20 pounds. 6 to 15 pounds. And let him get the mic on for you over there.
All right, can you hear me?
Okay, there we go. We got you now. And so, in your experience, are you seeing small fish? Have you?
Well, we're fishing, 3.5 inch, like the nets we fished. You're really not going to catch anything any smaller. So we're not, we don't really have the equipment out there to show, very
Well, even
small
visually.
fish. Every once in a while, I did see a big head carp about 2 weeks ago. It was barely in the net, but we couldn't get it in the boat. It was probably 8 inches, something like that. But, you know, getting it in the boat is a different story. you
Right.
know.
Okay. All right. Well, and again, thank you for hosting us last night.
Yeah,
Taking us
I'm
out. and
glad
letting us
y'all
see-
had a good
See it
time.
firsthand. Appreciate it. Any other questions for Clay before I turn him loose? Clay, Dennis got a question.
Yes, sir.
Chairman,
Really, I want to, how many people in here are either commercial fishermen or buying fish or in the, actively chasing this? I just want to say thank you. While Clay was up, I want to say thank you to all you guys. What you do is hard work. You bust your tails. You are the front lines. I think they said it here. We're buying time while we're working on these barriers. I just want to publicly say thank you to all you guys. You work your tails off, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think we got Monty. Monty, did I hear you? All right, Monty,
Chairman, can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hey, Chairman, if you can hear me, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that spent the time traveling to come down to firsthand see Clay and his operation and what these commercial fishermen are up against, and North American and Clay and all the other people that are in this program have done a great job, and thank you for that. I apologize. I didn't know I was going to have this assignment with UT, or I would have been there in person. But I'd also like to say thank you to the TWRA Commission and the administrative staff there for helping us get them the money that they're going to need next year, so we don't wind up with a shortfall. They've got plenty of money. We can go back to the business of catching fish and put a dent in it. And hopefully, with everybody coming together and the barriers, I think we're headed in the right direction. Absolutely. So thank you all for making your trek to Paris, Tennessee, and checking it out firsthand. And again, I apologize for not being there in person today. I would love to have been there.
Well, Monty, we know that you had something that you couldn't avoid taking care of today. Appreciate you calling in. Those in the room, probably everybody knows him. That's Monty Blue on the phone. So, Monty, appreciate that. Any further comments?
Yes, sir. Chairman.
Any further comments? Oh, yes, sir. If you would come to the microphone, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Yeah, and tell us who you are and who you're with.
Okay. On?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for having us. My name's Mike Slicky, and I'm here with Barron, and we have a company called M&B Fish Company that was hatched actually right here about 3 years ago. We were fishing out on the lake and talking with our guide, and they told us about the Asian carp issue. And then shortly after that, we read an article about Maine looking for bait shortages up there, and they're looking for an alternative. So we did our research, started working, and right now we're 2 years into this, and we're running about 2.4 million pounds of carp a year up to Maine for lobster bait. Now, it's a great bait, it's a great opportunity, and I'm glad you're looking at subsidies, because in our business, we started last year with running loads up. It was about $3,600 per load to bring a Asian carp, 40,000 pounds a trip to Maine. This past week, we sent a load up at $6,000. So our goal is to keep Asian carp price low and out cost our local bait, pogies and herons. Now, our bait dealers in Maine realize that the federal government keeps cutting the quotas on mackerel, herring, and pogies run cyclical, and they haven't run in 15 years, and lo and behold, as we started this 2 years ago, they started running. So we're in a competition, a cost competition with them. But we think that with subsidies, and we can get the price down below some of the natural bait, we can move, in 2-3 years, we could be up to 8 or 9 million pounds. They like the bait up there, it holds up well, and we're getting into the market more and more. We just opened up Florida this year as well. They're using carp down there for crab fishing, and we didn't have a full season with them. This year we'll have a full season with them starting in October, so we'll probably move like almost another 1.5 million pounds down there as well. So the more you can help us keep that price low and be competitive with the natural bait, we're more than willing to help it, and the market will bear it. I mean, we can really, I think in 3 of our cost analysis from talking to our bait dealers up there, we've already got a commitment already for a minimum of 2.4 million pounds in this fiscal year coming. That's a minimum, and they think they can do more the more people get used to fishing this. So we're here to help, And the more you can help us, the more fish we can get out of your lakes. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the committee members for him? All right, one more, sir. Yes, sir. And again, you've heard the instructions. Give us your name and who you're with for the record, and your comments.
I'll keep mine brief. My name is Travis McLeese. I'm the CEO of our Chamber of Commerce here in Paris, and I just want to thank you guys so much for this. You know, the word hope keeps ringing in my head. I want to tell you all that we've been recently on the phone with multiple national tournaments that are just buying into the potential, and that's a big, big deal for us. It's a big deal for our economy, and they're seeing the work that you all are doing, and they know that the weights that we've seen at the last couple of tournaments are signs of potential, and not to confirm anything, but I think between now and 2025, you'll see a couple of national tournaments back at Paris and Henry County. So like Dennis said earlier, thank you to you guys on the front line each and every day fighting this battle. I can't imagine the blood, sweat, and tears that's gone into this. Clay, you guys are phenomenal, and just the hours that you've put into it, the money you've invested. Our community thanks you, because I really feel like we're on the upswing, and it's going to take time, but we can market our way out of this while these guys deal with the science behind it. So just wanted to say thank you to those folks. Thank you to Mayor Ridgway, who's here, and just his vision, and continue to invest in things like the River Jam that we just finished. It's going to take things like that, the PBR next week. It's going to take us continuing to diversify our tourism portfolio while we get these things fixed. So just want to say thank you to everybody involved.
All right. Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, then without objection, we are adjourned. And I will be getting in touch with the members. Our next meeting will be in Nashville, and I'll be getting in touch with the members about some possible dates.